why do we work a horse in a round pen? And there's some specific reasons why we use a round pen rather than a square pen or a rectangular shaped pen. And there's specific reasons to use a rectangular shaped pen or a round pen or a square pen as well. I personally really like a square pen. But just the whole process of working one around, whether it's a round pen or a square pen or a rectangular pen, what are we doing there? And so this all comes to pass, and this has been some time ago, because I get mad and then I stayed real mad about it for a long time. But I was working a colt and a round pen, and a gal that she's a young trainer. She's a very good trainer, and she's going to be a really famous trainer one of these days. But she was watching me, and she said something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, just chasing one around the round pen," and that's where I got mad, because I don't just chase one around the round pen. And the part that made me mad is I thought, she thinks you put one in a round pen and just chase it around a round pen. And she specializes as a trainer, not as a colt starter. And so I can understand how, you kind of skip the high points trying to get to be a trainer. But that it really upset me that she thinks you just chase one around a round pen, and got me to thinking that probably a heck of a lot of other people see it that way too. Oh yeah, you just put him in there and just chase him around and air him out or whatever you're doing. And I think a lot of that is probably propagated by the join up theory. That was really popular at some point. Maybe it still is. But you chase that son of a gun around until the tropism from the pressure that you're putting on that horse. That's a cool word, by the way, if you want to look it up. But the tropism that you're putting on your horse from the pressure of your body finally causes the horse to just come to you. And that's what the join up thing is trying to do. But I don't like join up. And that's definitely not why I chase one around a round pen. I'm looking for some really specific things, and there's some mechanical things I'm trying to do when I'm working one in a round pen. So I watch their feet. I watch their feet more than I do anything, because the feet are the last part of the body to leave the ground. And I'll explain that in a minute. But the feet really have a lot to do with how much balance we have, the horse has, and therefore how much control we can have over the horse. I think everybody and their dog has heard it said, if you can control the feet, you can control the rest of the body. And that's true to an extent, a pretty good extent. But so I'm watching the feet, and I'm moving the horse around in a specific manner, and I'm changing the speed and the direction. And of course, I use my circus pole, so I can actually also change the diameter of their circle real easily. It's a lot harder work if you're just using the rail and just trying to push them around that rail. It's harder work for you and harder work for the horse. One of the 786,000 reasons to use a circus pole. But I'm watching their feet, and specifically what I'm looking for in their feet is the hind foot landing in the track of the front foot. So I'm watching the inside feet, of course, because I can't see the outside feet from where I'm at in the middle of the round pen. But when that front foot leaves the ground, I'm watching exactly where that track is and watching the hind foot, looking for it to land in the track of the front foot. And so when you start watching that, you take a horse, and a lot of times even it's a trained horse, but he's just kind of getting warmed up. And this is the same with lunging a horse. Whether it's a trained horse or whether it's an untrained horse or whatever, you'll watch. And not only a lot of times will the hind foot not land in the track of the front foot, it won't even land in line. It may land out here, it may land over here, and it may land this far behind. And as that horse starts to develop some muscle structure and some balance even just throughout that day, some confidence and starts to develop some self-carriage, you'll find that hind foot first, it starts falling in line with the track of the front foot. And then as you keep pushing the horse around, then it gets closer and closer and closer, and then lands a quarter of the way into the track of the front foot, and then halfway, and then all the way in. And then I don't expect this at all in the round pen stages, but later in life, when that horse is pretty trained and pretty broke, that hind foot will land clear on the outside, on the other side of the track of the front foot. It'll go to landing directly in it, and then 3/4 of the way, and then halfway, and then a quarter, and then clear up. And I've seen horses, really, really broke horses, that some of them were dressage horses that have been in the Olympics, some of them were ranch horses, but their hind foot would land that far in front of the track of their front foot. And that's a sign, you can just watch one move around, and that's a sign of a lot of collection and a lot of self-carriage, because collection doesn't have anything to do with their head. That's frame. We like their head to be framed up and look pretty, but collection is the rounding of the back and the loading of the weight onto their hind limbs. A horse in his natural state, untrained, carries 60% of the weight of his body on his front limbs. As they start to get collected and start to get stronger and start to build this self-carriage that everybody's always talking about. Everybody talks about self-carriage and nobody says what it is. It's because 192% of the people that talk about it don't know what it is. But as that horse starts to build some self-carriage and some collection, they start to shift their weight back onto those hind limbs. And once that horse starts to do that, the hind foot starts to land closer to the track of the front foot, and then into the track of the front foot, and then gradually clear on the other side of the track of the front foot. So that's way into it. That's way past the round penning stage. But when I'm moving a colt around in a round pen, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that hind foot to start reaching up under him further and further and further. And you've got to use judgment. Helps to start at a couple of thousand colts to know how much you need to get per day. How much can this colt take? Some you may only get that. Some you may only get them in line that day and not reaching at all. Some you may only get them in line that week and not get them reaching at all. Others you've got them in line and reaching from the first time you ever worked them, and you've got them dang near in their track on the first week. But that's what I'm looking for is that hind foot to start reaching. That tells me that they're loading their weight and rounding their back. As far as like I said, I'm not really into the what do we call it? Join up. I'm not all that worried about their eye or their ear. He sees me and he hears me. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about his body. I don't want to change his mind to try to change the way he moves. I want to change the way he moves to try to change his mind. And so that's mostly what I'm looking for when I put one around the round pen. It's pretty simple, which is good for me. I like things simple, and I need things to be simple. And a horse likes things simple more than I do, and needs things to be simple more than I do. So I'm moving around till I start to see that I've gained a little bit from yesterday. Gained a little bit more collection, gained a little bit more strength, gained a little bit more balance from yesterday, and then we go the other direction. And once I've gained a little more, then that's the end of my round pen session. Now, there absolutely are times when it's a Monday and that son of a gun's had 2 days off, when, you're just letting them get the cobs out. You're just kind of letting them stretch out and be silly if they want to be silly and this and that. Everybody does that. There's times when you're just trying to get a little air out of them. But when I'm actually working one in the round pen, that's what I look for. And you'll find once you start watching this and noticing it, that, today this colt, he picked up and started getting in his own track, in 3 or 4 laps. And then you turn him to go the other direction, and it takes him 15 minutes to find that. Well, there's a lot going on there. And you can bet that then once you get on his back, he's going to be, he's going to, have a little problem with one side or the other. He's going to be off balance one side or the other if you don't work them all the way until until they get balanced. Sometimes with a colt, if you work them that long, you don't have any colt left to ride, so you don't necessarily work them all the way into balance. Sometimes you do. But what's going on there is with a young horse, they're growing, they're changing, their hip high, their shoulder high, they're this, they're that. If you think back to when you were a kid, sometimes you woke up and your left leg hurt. You didn't know why. You said, "Mom, my left leg hurts, I'm dying." And she said, "No, it's growing pains." At least that's what my mom always said, unless my left leg really was cut off. Everything was growing pains. And so colts have that too. They wake up in the morning sometimes and they've grown a little bit overnight, or maybe there's some muscle tension or some muscle soreness from getting work the day before. And so it's harder for them on one side or the other of their body to find that balance. But that's okay. That's what we're doing. That's what we're looking for in that round pen work, is trying to help that horse find his balance. I talked about the foot is the last thing to leave the ground, and I'm just going to hit the high points on this. And a lot of people would say, "Well, no, it's the first thing to leave the ground." No, it's absolutely not the first thing to leave the ground. The point of the shoulder is the first thing to leave the ground. On an unbroke horse, that shoulder's going to go for first. They're in pressure, and so they'll move that point of the shoulder in the direction they're going for. Anything else happens. Then the neck, then the head, then the ear, then the eye, and then the foot. And the foot is the last thing to leave. If you're watching a horse's feet to see what he's going to do, he's done it before you ever had a chance to do anything. Whether that's be out of the way or be in the way, or not get kicked or not get struck, it's done happened before you ever knew, because the foot's the last thing to leave. And so when you watch your colts, when you throw them in the round pen, they'll start out leading to the inside with the point of that shoulder, and they're using their head and neck to balance themselves. They're using it the opposite direction, like a ballast, to balance themselves, and leading with the point of that shoulder. And as you work them and as they start to get balance and start to get some collection and some carriage, they'll rotate and carry those shoulders square, because they're starting to balance. But the foot is still always the last thing to leave the ground. Or the last thing to leave. I guess it's the only thing that leaves the ground, but it's the last thing to leave. So that's that, and I'll kind of finish by telling about a little colt I just started. I think I put the first ride on him yesterday. And he's a fancy little guy. He's in the futurity sales in Fort Worth, and he's obviously been round penned a bunch. He's a stud colt, and when you're fitting one for one of those fancy futurity sales, you want them popping and looking their best. And so it's pretty common for a colt like that to get put in a round pen every day for 30 minutes a day and chased around, partially because he's a stud and he's in the stall and he's antsy and he's going to kill himself if you don't give him some exercise. But it's partially to build a bunch of muscle development and this and that. And somebody that fits a horse really well will have one coming out of there balanced and confident and looking good. Somebody that just chases a horse around, which is what started this whole deal, will have what we have in this horse. He got here, he was a steady acting little orangutan, and he wasn't shaped right. We all looked at him and went, I don't know, it's something weird there. And it's because of the way the muscle developed, and he didn't have a lot of balance, and he didn't have any carriage, and consequently he moved kind of funny, and that was also contributing to the steadiness, because he wasn't very confident, and so he kind of studded up, because that's what studs do when they're not confident. So anyway, I worked him for a solid week before I ever even saddled him. Worked him around that round pen. And he knew what happens in round pens. He'd get in there and he'd let out a war cry and just go to just ripping and racing around. But I was working him different than what he was used to. For one, I had the pole, so I had a lot more control over him. I had him in hand. I had a lot more control over him. But also I wasn't just working him till he was tired, or working him till he had a little sweat on his neck or anything like that. I was looking for specific things. And after a week's time, and it's not because I round penned him for a week solid, he'd been round penned for 2 months solid prior to that. It was just in the wrong way. But after a week's time, that horse he was a different horse to be around. He was less steady. I could lead him through the barn. He didn't try to talk to anybody. He didn't do anything like that. And he was business minded about what we were doing, because he realized there's a point to all this. There's a reason for the work we're doing in here. And he once I saw that he was going in there and doing his work and looking for the release, because he knew what the maneuver was. You know, it's a maneuver when we slide one to a stop, but it's just as much of a maneuver when we move him around the round pen. He knew what the maneuver was, and so he was doing the maneuver and looking for the release, which is what we call teaching a horse. Other people call it training a horse. And he'd just been trained to just run around till he was out of breath. So after a week, when he started acting confident and showing me all the things I wanted to see, which is really nothing more than stepping in his own track, I went ahead and saddled him, and the next day I rode him, and he rode off like a perfect little gentleman. So that is all to say, when you round pen a horse or see anybody else round penning a horse, it's a maneuver. It's a specific maneuver. It's the first maneuver we start with. When we're starting these colts, that's the very first maneuver they learn. And we're not just chasing them around trying to get them aired out. Like I say, sometimes we are, but that's down the road after we've rode them some. Somebody said one time, reward the smallest effort. I think that's what it is. Reward the smallest effort. But man, that sounds cool. That sounds really good. I want to reward the smallest effort in my horse. And I think, no, I don't. I want to ask him till he does it right, and then reward it when he does it right. If you do that, you have to teach the horse what the maneuver is in little tiny pieces, step by step, teach the horse exactly what the maneuver is, and then ask him to do the maneuver, and when he does it right, you reward him. If you just reward the effort, you got a colt that just runs around the round pen, because that's the effort. Safety tips and philosophy and stuff. I don't know. Always keep an edge on your knife, boy, because a well-honed edge is a man's best hedge to the various uncertainties of life.